Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here today. Thank you, Emily, for that warm welcome. I'm Ayana Aline Grant, and I lead the social media team here at Yelp. And I'm so excited for today's session on trends in pop culture and social media. I have over 10 years of experience across consumer tech, hospitality, consumer packaged goods, and media. And for me, I've always been passionate about why certain fads or trends pick up steam on the internet and what really drives virality. And so, at Yelp, we really leverage various marketing channels to ensure that we're speaking to customers in a way that's not only authentic, but also relevant and realistic to the brand. And today we're here with three other amazing marketing leaders to really hear from them on what's worked for them, what's worked for their brands, and really how we became a part of a larger online conversation. So before I turn it over to Miriam, Emily, and Kevin, I'd like to first thank you guys for taking the time to be here today. There's a million things that I'm sure you all, as entrepreneurs, really could be doing, and you're carving out time in your busy schedules to be here. And so, just thank you for that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Miriam first to introduce herself, and then Emily, and then Kevin. Take it away, Miriam.
Hi, thank you, Ayana. My name's Miriam Fried. I am a personal trainer and I'm a small business owner myself. I grew my fitness business, MF Strong, from basically just being me as a solo entrepreneur to a team of 7 trainers with our own brick and mortar studio in Brooklyn using the power of social media.
That's amazing. Great to have you here, Miriam.
Emily Buckley here. Short background on myself. I've been in the food and wellness industries for almost 15 years now, both at CPG and e-commerce businesses. Most notably, I was one of the founding member teammates at Freshly, building all things product and brand until our exit to Nestle for $1.5 billion. And since then, I've been consulting with a number of consumer good businesses. I think one most notable to this panel is actually working at Warren James, incubating brands for the internet's biggest content creators and celebrities like Hassan Parker, Good Mythical Morning, XQC, et cetera. So very involved in the pop culture and excited to be here.
That's great. Thank you, Emily.
Hi there. I am Kevin Keith. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Edible, and I've been here just over a year. This is my 30th year in marketing, starting in New York City for about 10 years, mostly on the agency side. Then I switched the past 15 years to the corporate side. Most recently, 5.5 years as the Chief Brand Officer at Orange Theory Fitness, which is very much a social brand, and we grew it as a social brand. Now at Edible, our big goal is to be a social brand, not just be on social. So this is a really great conversation. Excited.
That's great. And Kevin, thank you. Thank you for that. So, when we talk about social media and pop culture trends, a lot of you may think of TikTok. In my opinion, TikTok doesn't necessarily just fuel the culture, but also helps create culture. However, as you all know, as marketing professionals, we have to activate on trends in real time, but we also have to be culturally relevant to our consumer, which could be on various social media platforms. So I'd really like to start off by hearing from you all on your general social strategies and what has worked and what hasn't before we dive into trends specifically. Emily, would you like to start first?
Absolutely. And I'd say as a consultant, I'm working with a number of different businesses. So it definitely depends on the business model itself. Where I found a lot of success working at Warren James, incubating these brands for the internet's biggest content creators, is they're actually tend to be very YouTube native. Reason being is that slightly longer form content just drives higher engagement. They've really been able to incubate their own brands as content creators through YouTube. But of course, for consumer good brands, e-commerce, Instagram is a backbone of our short form content. We have been kind of playing around more and more with TikTok with a few of the different brands, but it really depends on what trend we're trying to seize. So if it's something that's supposed to be very pithy and we know it's going to be here today, be gone tomorrow, we'll lean on TikTok and Instagram for that more short form content. If we're really trying to ride a trend that's relevant to the business model and maybe the products, we tend to lean more on YouTube. But again, it's contingent on the brand.
No, that's great. And I think that the one thing that a lot of people can be reminded is YouTube has always been such a great platform for monetization for those creators. And so it makes sense for those that are, up and coming and trying to build a name for themselves and also trying to be, have more financial stability to think about YouTube when they're beginning.
Exactly.
Kevin or Miriam, would you all like to share, Miriam, maybe from the business owner side of what social looks like for you as you're building out your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a business owner, you do kind of have to dip your toe into all of the different platforms. Personally, for our brand, Instagram has been most successful because I find Instagram has a little bit of everything. So we're able to access reels and video content. We're also able to do, static feed posts. And then Instagram has stories, which as a small business, the beauty of stories is really that like kind of just more personalized, like we are real people behind the brand aspect that I think kind of brings a small business to life and attracts an audience to you because they want to work with not just a business, but the real people behind the business. And I think Instagram does allow for that like little bit of extra personal kind of community building aspect by utilizing stories and just utilizing kind of everything that they have to offer. That said, I do still agree with you that TikTok is what drives the trends. So you do have to be aware of what's happening over on that platform, even if you're not utilizing it as much.
No, I think that's a fair point. And, for the other business owners that are on this call, the great thing about stories for those that maybe aren't, dipping their toes there is that you can drive traffic a lot easier. So if you are really trying to measure what your social efforts are doing and how that's driving traffic back to your pages, stories is a great place for that. Just to round out, Kevin, you've worked at many brands focusing on marketing and social. For you currently, what is working for you on social? And then even I think what's helpful for, things that you've tried that maybe haven't worked as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like Miriam was talking about, like on Instagram. I think when we're most authentic and real to people, we get the best engagement and we get results. So I think, we've been a year in, we kind of quietly removed arrangements from our brand about 4 years ago, but I've really leaned in on that. So we have a kind of creative platform, which is there's an edible for that, which is a little cheeky, but it really in social, we kind of carry that into, we're gifting companies. So these moments that matter in life, like birthdays and anniversaries, and you just aced your exam or got in college. So in social, we really find a lot of success when we lean in authentically and also kind of poke fun at ourselves. We don't take ourselves so seriously. So a couple of weeks ago, Ryan Gosling had a funny skit on SNL about papyrus font. And he actually had an old Edible Arrangements logo that was papyrus font. It's a horrible font, by the way, but we sent him an arrangement, it's made a whole thing, and he posted about it. And we do a lot of things like that where we kind of just have fun with the brand and don't take ourselves so seriously. And I think that's been really successful for us so far.
That's amazing. And I mean, that's like the perfect example for a brand being able to be aware of what's happening in real time and activate on it. Would you be able to share, how that opportunity came up? Was this someone that happened to see SNL, just the behind the scenes before these
Oh,
moments?
I have some spies on my team. They're looking everywhere. So we're all I mean, we're always on messaging each other like, oh my God, did you see that on SNL tonight or whatever. So I think just responsiveness and timeliness is so crucial. So I mean, it could be anybody. I've had even secretaries message us over Teams saying, hey, I just saw something. I'd say we've done 8 segments that are on either Netflix movies or we reached out to, I don't know if you heard of The Fall of the House of Usher in the fall of last year, huge #1 Netflix hit. Second episode, they made fun of edible arrangements. We sent her, the star of it, a big, beautiful bouquet, and she hadn't really seen our product in years. She was blown away, posted on it, got a ton of traffic just from that alone. So we're always trying to stay engaged with that and keep our eyes and ears out. You just have to be quick. And then sometimes you decide, you know what, I'm going to pass on that one.
Yes, and I think that's something that we'll definitely touch on of like when are these moments the right times for us to engage. Before we go there, I do just want to kind of talk about how we're finding these opportunities. And Kevin, thank you for giving that example. For those that are trying to identify opportunities to find for your brand. At Yelp, we often leverage different social media listening tools, things like Brand Watch or Sprout Social, where you can kind of understand how you're being mentioned or what the related conversations are. You can also go really old school and look up specific hashtags that are relevant to your brand specifically, but also having a list of other industry or relevant terms that you can look up is also really helpful if you're trying to understand where you might be surfacing. I think this topic of, when do you know when it's worth kind of investing in these trend spotting and activating for your brand is really helpful. Emily or Miriam, would you be able to share any other examples or when you've had to make a decision of if you wanted to go and be a part of a trend? Miriam, maybe you want to go and start first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I definitely have some examples on that. I think obviously trends are super important. My business specifically, our brand voice is very much all about sort of being a little bit of a different voice in my industry. Very much as a fitness business, we approach things from a much more like realistic anti-diet culture standpoint, which means that a lot of the relevant trends in fitness aren't necessarily relevant to us, but that doesn't mean that we can't utilize those trends in a way that fits our brand. So for me, I'm always thinking about like, okay, this might not work for us, right? Because it's not necessarily our brand voice or our messaging, but can we sort of tweak it or twist it to fit the messaging that we want to get across to attract the clients that we want to bring in? A recent example that I actually do have is a few months back, Miley Cyrus performed at the Grammys, and it was this really big trending topic, Miley Cyrus's arms. Obviously, she looked great. So a lot of fitness businesses were going out and posting things about, Miley Cyrus arm workouts, how to do this workout so you can look like Miley Cyrus. That doesn't work for our brand, right? But this was trending, and I definitely wanted to be a part of that conversation. So instead, we tweaked that, and we instead made a video talking about how, you can definitely do workouts to feel stronger, but you're not necessarily going to look like a celebrity because you're not a celebrity. And just talking a little bit more about sustainable and realistic fitness practices and how we utilize that in our business. It actually went viral on both TikTok and Instagram because it was relevant to the conversation. It was a hot topic of the moment, but it was something different and people were sort of excited to hear that. So that was a really, good example of how we took that trend that wouldn't have worked for us and made it work.
That's an amazing example.
Made that her own. I think that's where a lot of brands get it right, is when they have a point of view. It's not just a copy paste of a trend going viral, like you just mentioned, Miriam.
And I think, at the core of that is really understanding, what your brand's voice is and who you want to be, which is that foundational marketing work that people need to do even before they think about the trends. If you're not sure of who you are as a brand and how you want to come across, it's really difficult to make those decisions about what is for you and what isn't for you. So I definitely think in terms of, tips of where to start with this is to understand your brand voice and where you want to show up and how you want to perceived, and then going from there. Miriam, that's a great example. Emily, would you like to share some examples on your side?
Yeah, I was going to say, piggybacking on that, of course, working in health and wellness industry as well, but just on a different side relative to like consumables, superfoods, like healthy foods, et cetera. It's a very trendy category. And so I think it's important to really understand like the root psychographics behind trends, because there's going to be some that are like pop cultural moments and it's like, okay, we feel like it's aligned with the brand, like let's go for it. It's meant to be like a pithy, okay, we have a couple posts on it next week, and then it's not meant to live like, outside of that short window. Whereas like other things like keto, and I mean, even some trend, like health trends of people are drinking apple cider vinegar mixed with honey, mixed with lemon, and that's it for a week, which I do not advise. You really have just so many trends that are constantly popping up, and like, how do you stay relevant, but be very conscientious of like the integrity of your brand? So like a great example is, obviously like keto has been trending, and it's actually been on the downward trend for a long time. This is less of like one of these like, pop culture moment trends. It's more of like, I would say more embedded in the industry, but it still was only like, I think it played like a 5-year course or so. And it had like in some markets kind of a negative connotation. So when we see something like keto, we try to understand like, okay, if keto is becoming viral and, eliminating, all carbs and only eating meat for a week, like what are the actual psychographics behind this? Can we attach to that versus attaching to the trend itself? And weight loss has been rebranded, so many times over the last like 40 years. So maybe what's more interesting interesting to us is the concept of, or low carb has been trending for the last 40 years. What's more important to us is the concept of low carb. Like, our people are trying to lose weight, they're trying to cut carbs. So then how do we incorporate that into our, into our branding, into our social strategy versus just hopping on the keto or apple cider vinegar honey trend? So that's my example of something we did at Freshly.
I think that's a really great point. Essentially, rather than just jumping on the trend for trend's sake, what is the like macro discussion that's happening here, and making sure that you're aware of what's being shared so that you can move forward in a way that feels intentional for your brand. I think, that concept and timing is often quite difficult, right? Because we all know as marketer leaders, we're trying to move quickly. These things are happening. We want to make sure that we're on time, because we all know that when you're late to a trend, it's almost as bad as doing the trend poorly, right? So how important is timing in your execution plans, and how does that work with, some of the other elements that we've discussed? Kevin, I'll turn it over to you first.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on, like, is it a flash trend? I had an example. I don't know if you guys saw it last week. There's this brand called Nice, these mango gummies. So it was a TikTok craze going on. I have 6 kids, full disclosure, they're all in college now, but so I get TikTok galores. But it was something that was happening on, in social, particularly on TikTok. It made a run on Walgreens, which is the last time you've heard of a run on Walgreens, but literally they can't keep it. But what we did with that, because we developed product, we didn't do anything with that, because we can't go and buy a bunch of gummy mangoes and put it in our product. But we learned from that, hey, Gen Z loves experiential products. You actually take these little gummies and you can peel them. So that was a learning for product development for us. So we did nothing, but we learned from it, and we're developing product for something future. But bigger trends, I think it's what we were just discussing. I think, Miriam, you were talking about that. We love having a good point of view about something. If it's trending, we see it's kind of sustaining, to have a point of view about that. And we'll develop content, but typically we lean more towards influencer now and kind of uniquely like user-generated content rather than doing our own content. So we're finding that really works better for us in general.
And I think like the beauty of working with some of those creators for these moments is sometimes they even have better insights into what's happening, right? So it feels even more authentic and even better for your consumers to see it from them versus you.
100%. Yes.
Definitely. Emily, would you like to share thoughts on timing?
Yeah, Kevin. Well, I was actually nodding my head to the previous statement. I mean, at Warren James, what do? It's less of chasing trends, it's chasing the creators that are the ones that are starting the trend. So oftentimes, like, when we're looking at white space opportunities and we're doing a trend analysis, we might find, okay, there's an opportunity in nostalgic foods, for example. Like, Gen Z loves nostalgic foods. There's been like a reinvention of like all these like, Pop-Tarts, Cheetos, whatever it is, like all better for you. Then how can we actually become part of that trend? Well, we partnered with Good Mythical Morning. They have very much like, call it like an 80s, 90s vibe. It's like kind of hard to explain. Anyone who watches the show will like totally get what I'm saying. So instead of trying to like ride this trend on our own, we connected with them, incubated a like nostalgic cereal brand that was meant to be just an LTO. And the whole notion was like, how are they actually like, since they're kind of driving this like nostalgic trend, let's give it to them to actually figure out how we deliver on it, if that makes sense. And we do a lot of activity like that, where it's like creator first, trend second. So
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think understanding the different ways in which people activate on trends, and we also kind of we're dipping our toes into a conversation about budget, which very, very, very much varies based on where you are, where your business is. Miriam, I'd like to turn over to you to hear from the business owner side what timing and trends looks like for you, and are you partnering with other business owners in your field? Are you doing this alone? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, timing is definitely important. I do think that as a small business, you have to be careful of just hopping on trends for trend's sakes. I think it's super easy to feel like you have to be doing every single trend to stay relevant. But I also think if you're smaller, it's more important to establish yourself as a brand with a very specific and clear message. And then from there, really paying attention to the trends and then grabbing at the ones that work, instead of trying to jump on every single one. Because I think especially when you're not super well known, or maybe a lot of people aren't aware of you, then your brand is sort of muddied and people are sort of unclear. They're coming to your page and they see a bunch of trends, but they don't really see who you are at your essence. They don't really understand what you do or what you offer. And then even if one of those trends goes viral, it might not necessarily be bringing the right type of client or making the right types of sale, like bringing people who are going to actually buy from your business. It might just be bringing eyes on your page, which is nice, but it's not necessarily going to help you as a business owner. So you do have to be thinking about that all the time of like, cool, maybe this trend is going viral right now, but is it relevant to us? Is it going to kind of confuse people who come to my page and they're scrolling through really quickly to understand what we do and what we offer?
I think Miriam brings up a great point, which is really audience following, not just chasing numbers, but chasing people who generally want to follow you and have an interest. And free tip, Miriam, just from what I learned in 5.5 years of Orange Theory, our number one top performing content was always motivational and relatable. So anything that motivated the member, they would want to share that with somebody else. We got so many shares out of that. So it was really their way to digitally pat someone on the back, basically to say, hey, keep it up. So we could bring in celebrities, which we did. We could bring in high, beautiful production value content. It was always simple, relatable, usually a quote from Ellen Latham, the creator of Orange Theory, always top performing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of goes back to what we were saying, a couple of minutes ago about really understanding what your foundation is. And so before you're making those choices, you have that intentionality before you make any of these moves. One of the things that Miriam, you just touched upon, which I think is really important for anyone that goes into this foray thinks about are, risk aligned with pop culture trends and different social media movements. As a brand, as a large brand, we're always thinking, we always have, legal in our mind, and making sure that we're thinking about music licensing. We're thinking about, not showcasing celebrities' faces or leveraging celebrities for marketing purposes, because you can get into hot water there when you're a bigger brand. So those are a few things that, we think about on the Yelp side. But I'd love to turn it over to you all to see about how you mitigate these risks, how you're thinking about whether it's legal or even it's just risk of going into a trend that we think that we're aware of, but maybe we're not fully aware of what the roots are. Kevin, I'll turn it to you first.
Yeah, I think it probably starts with what kind of a brand are you? I mean, I've worked for big mega corporations like Coca-Cola, and then I've worked for multi-unit brands like Orange Theory and now Edible, which is a franchise business, of course. When we go and engage in some trend or something in social, that's one thing. We have all our protocols. We have our legal team here, but I worry about the system. If they pick up stuff with music licensing, we always, no matter how many times you tell them, their primary business is not social. So they, I've had many cases where they jump on and put stuff out there with music licensing violations, IP, you name it. So I think trying to control that has been really difficult. And I think many franchise brands struggle with that, but doesn't mean I don't want them to participate and engage. So it's just constantly re-educating and re-educating. And then after that, re-educating again.
Right, because it's hard for, some of those brands that maybe don't have that background to say, well, if I'm seeing this brand do it, then why can't I do this?
Right, exactly. But unfortunately, if you're part of a really popular franchise brand, they look at you as a big brand, but even though many of them are family owned, small businesses, but they get targeted nonetheless. So, and we typically provide them support if they get in trouble, when trying to get them out of trouble, but avoidance is the best policy.
Yes. And I also think having a policy for when you do and do not engage is really helpful, whether you are a smaller business or a larger enterprise. Just having a policy in place for when you're activating or when you're trying to execute these things are really helpful. Miriam, do you have any thoughts on risk with pop culture trends? I know you just kind of touched upon this, but I think it's really helpful to hear from someone that's a business owner as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a small business owner, you probably don't have necessarily like a huge legal team. So you're often going to be the one like hands-on dealing with all of this. So if something goes awry, everyone wants to go viral until something goes viral for the wrong reasons or gets to the wrong side of the internet. So you are going to be the one face-to-face dealing with these comments and dealing with people coming at you if things don't quite go your way. So I think it's just something to be prepared for, and also why it is really important to maybe not just like jump on things blindly without doing your research, making sure it fits with your brand, making sure it like feels like a good match. Because yeah, things, once it's out there in the internet, you're going to be the one dealing with that. And that can be a lot to take on. So something to think about.
It absolutely is, especially when you're handling that on your own or with a small team. Emily, go ahead.
And Ayana, just to piggyback on that, like, again, this is more relevant to the food and like CPG wellness space, but on my side, it's like working with companies that have to be very conscientious of what content, like claims they make. So, if there's any health claims or even, food related health claims in their social content, you really run the risk of a class action lawsuit. And so this can feel intimidating. It's like, well, if I don't have legal, if I don't have a regulatory person in house, I will say, what I found effective with smaller brands that I work with is you actually can get access to regulatory, like a regulatory consultant for not a lot of money that can build parameters for your team. So and I sometimes find that if you just have some kind of parameters in place, even if they're not necessarily like super prescriptive and the team's not following them, it just makes them pause when they're about to say, this product will help you lose weight, or this product will help you, will improve your brain fog and things like that. So that is actually more accessible than I think some small companies would realize. So I highly recommend that.
That's a great tip. And the one thing that I also say to my team is if you're about to post something or you're thinking about something and you have a little nagging feeling that you're not sure, just pause, get a second opinion. Even if you don't have a large team, share it with someone else. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence. If you don't have that document and that policy, dive into the comments, look at the hashtags that are being used. Who was the original creator? Look at their page. What are they talking about? Do you want to be involved or, associated with this, or just a few things? Just really looking to understand, like, what is the sentiment around this can be really helpful before you move forward. This has been really, really helpful for people understanding how to make those choices if you're going to execute. I'd love to talk now about measuring the success of these initiatives. So I know, Kevin, when you originally kicked off, you were talking about the SNL example and then getting content shared. I'd love to hear more about some of the successes, and are there any specific metrics that you are using that you find particularly helpful to understand, was this a success? Was this not a success?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's really important to measure these things, of course. And, we measure it just like we do paid media in many ways, like ROAS, return on ad spend. So, there is a cost to us, our time, our people. Sometimes we send out product as an influencer. Sometimes we'll pay an influencer, but usually it's organic. But, I'll give you a recent example. We can track things. We can give promo codes and actually track the sale all the way to the very end. So we had a employee appreciation day last month, 3 days, one influencer, $305,000 generated in sales, just from using her promo code we gave her. And I think we paid her 15 grand. Then we had 5 more organic on top of that, generated 65,000 in sales. So we measure all that stuff, all the way down to the transaction level. But then that's the influencer side, but then there's just the brand side, which are impressions and engagement, and all those things are important because not everything should be about an instant purchase. And I've got to keep people engaged and also really recruit the next generation of edible lovers. So there's kind of 2 different metrics, more brand and also very transactional. But we see a lot of success on the influencer side by, we've gotten a lot more strategic and using the right tools to actually find the right influencers. And it's been really, really transformative, truly.
No, that's really great to hear, and I think very helpful for those that are listening in. Emily or Miriam, would you like to share any ways in which you're measuring success for this? Emily, go first.
Yeah, I'm always looking at Miriam. I'm like, can't tell first. Yeah, I think it's totally contingent on like the brand campaign, right? Like, is it if you're running a campaign with an influencer or doing some kind of sweepstakes based on some trend, we look at like typical things like Google Analytics for traffic surges, like engagement metrics, et cetera. If you really lean into a trend and you're launching a product, for example, then of course I'm going to look at like how it impacts the rest of my product portfolio. So it's got like the classic Lay's or Oreo strategy where they launch all these like funky, very trendy flavors, and it just lifts their core portfolio. So like they get sales on like their most basic flavors by by subscribing to these trends via their product. So for those, I'm just looking at like, the total product portfolio and sales. But like, I think it's important before hopping on trends, you're basically, to challenge your team or challenge yourself to say, like, what am I actually trying to achieve? And then aligning your KPIs based on that.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thank you, Emily. Miriam.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely pay close attention to our analytics in terms of just general engagement, views, following, that sort of thing. Again, I kind of touched on this earlier, but when you are a business, it's like those numbers are important, but they don't really matter as much as like, are we bringing people in to our page who are actual potential clients? Because that's great to have the numbers there, and it's great to have videos go viral, but it's not super helpful ultimately if it's not bringing in actual clients. So I'm actually looking too, is it bringing in like our ideal sort of clientele, the type of people who are going to reach out to us and actually work with us and utilize our services. So I think paying attention to that is actually a little more important for us, because we want to make sure that they're actually transitioning from follower to client. And if not, we need to adjust a little bit because we're maybe drawing in not the correct audience or the correct potential clientele. And touching also on to influencer marketing, I think small businesses can definitely utilize influencer marketing, but it's also, you want to really be, you might not have as much money, or you might not have the ability to invest as much into influencers. So I definitely would always encourage people to pay close attention to who their audience is. If you have overlap, what do they talk about on their page? What's their niche? Because it can be utilized in a great way and it can draw a lot of attention to your business, but you don't want to just work with any influencer because they have a big following. They might have a big following that will never have an interest in your services because it's so outside of your niche that it's not relevant at all. So it can definitely be utilized. You want to work with the right people. You want to make sure that, if you're investing that time, that money into that person, that it's a good match.
That's an incredible point. I know that we're not going into the influencer marketing four-way today. That can be a whole other conversation, but Miriam, that is so helpful for those that are interested in understanding where you could take like a next step. So thank you for sharing that. We don't have much time left, but I just we had one question come in that I want to make sure that we touch upon before I ask you all some rapid fire questions before we end. Can you just touch upon any type of tools that you're using to spot trends and analyze trends? Mary, maybe we can start with you, and then we can go over to Emily and Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, spending time on those apps is super important. Myself and my marketing manager, like a lot of what we do is research. Like we are just on it. We are paying attention to hashtags. We are paying attention to similar businesses in our niche, and we are unfortunately like just spending time utilizing the apps. And I know sometimes people don't want to be on them. They want to limit their screen time, but I don't think you can create awareness without actually like actively taking part in those applications, making sure that you're researching and making that a part of your actual like work week. And if you have, a marketing team, marketing manager, making sure that they're also like staying on top of it, because again, it changes so quickly that you have to actively be utilizing the applications yourself to know what's going on.
I think that's completely fair. Even taking those 15 minutes at the beginning of the day to just get up to date on what's going on. If you don't have that extra, if you don't have an hour, 15 minutes can make a huge difference. Kevin, Emily, do you want to start?
I was going to echo what Miriam was saying. I mean, you can have all the tools. I've had Hootsuite. We have Sprout now. We'll probably go back to Hootsuite. But spending time in platform is the best way because there's so much nuance to it that you learn. So I think just having people present and constantly looking and engaged in that is probably the most useful way. Certainly you can use tools, but I think the best tool is being in platform.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually going to say, I always have amazing Gen Z folks managing our social. In the event that I can't spend as much time, they are digitally native, like more digitally than myself. And they tell me the trend. So it might sound funny, but I hang out with folks that, are just in a part of the pop culture that maybe like, I feel like I can't, maybe offer the amount of time that I should be managing those apps. I do feel like that's the best way. The human touch outperforms the AI tools and everything else.
And Emily, I asked my Gen Zers like, hey, who should I follow? So I have a whole string of people I follow just to kind of give a little piece of what they're looking at 24/7. So I've always found that really helpful as well. And they laugh when I tell them a trend before they tell me. Like, hi, how do you know this? Like,
So
what
big takeaway
Yeah.
is find a mentor that is Gen Z to help
Yeah,
direct
yeah.
your trend strategy. um, I want to do some really quick rapid fire questions for you all. Like, don't think, just respond. I'm going to go in order. So it's Kevin, Emily, Miriam. Favorite restaurant in the US? Kevin, go.
Oh God. Well, I'm cheap and cheerful. So Yumby tacos here in Atlanta.
I love cheap and cheerful. Go, Emily.
This is very hard being a foodie. I'll just say Hanoi House and the East Village has been one of my favorites for Vietnamese.
Miriam.
Also tough. I'm a huge foodie as well. Currently probably Birds of a Feather. It's amazing Chinese food in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Yeah, I'm getting very, very hungry. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing and why? Kevin, go ahead.
Me, urban planning probably.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's
Emily.
just there's just such a struggle for affordable housing and things like that. I've always been interested in urban and walkable issues, and I think the root of it is the way we use our land. So, but I don't have the degree nor the expertise, so I just am a fan, and I go to attend a lot of city council meetings.
No, that's incredible. Thank you. Emily.
I would be in agriculture. I like to say that my husband would be the farmer, and I would create some like jams and breads and the food from it. So he'll do the hard labor. But I just believe it's so impactful to like climate change and just our society's health. So I'd be a farmer.
That's great. And Miriam.
Maybe something in mental health. As a trainer, I've learned so much of how like intertwined mental and physical health are. So I often end up talking about that a lot with my clients anyway. So I think that would be interesting to do as well.
That's incredible. Well, thank you all so much for taking time to speak with us today. This has been such a really, really incredible panel, hearing from you all and hearing your expertise. So thank you. Before I go and transition back to Emily, one thing that I always do for those that are watching is if you follow Yelp for Business on Instagram and you DM Yelp for Business today, I will personally answer any social media related questions that you have about your business. So I will individually respond with any social tips based on your questions. I did this last summit and they were a hit. So I'd love to do this again. Make sure you follow Yelp for Business on Instagram and then DM me with your questions and I will take the time to answer. So thank you all again. And I will transition back to Emily.